Thank you for everyone who has joined us and who is continuing to join us, and those of you that are now watching the recording. My name is Sunny Mullen. I am the Director of Outreach with Help Hope Live. We are a national nonprofit that assists individuals living with catastrophic injuries and illnesses to go into their communities to safely and responsibly fundraise for all of their medical expenses and related costs. And this is the first in a series of our Hope Talks on spinal cord injury and the life period through that. This one being the 100 days directly after that injury. So I am lucky enough here to introduce our moderator, who will then introduce our panelists. So Jonathan Sigworth from More Than Walking, you can take it away. Thank you so much for everyone being here. And just a reminder as well, we do have a Q&A for anyone who would like to ask a question of our panelists throughout the Hope Talk. You can put it in the Q&A, and our chat is also open. So wherever you're comfortable holding dialogue, we are here to help with that. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Sunny. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar and this discussion. My name is Jonathan Sigworth. I'm a C7 complete quadriplegic, and I've been injured since 2006 when I fell off a 70-foot cliff in India. And I run the nonprofit called More Than Walking. And I am very pleased to moderate this discussion. You know, the first 100 days, it's a messy period of time. Your whole world goes upside down, and it's really difficult to find firm ground. But from my experience, and you know, as I think you'll see from the experience of our other panelists, solid ground is there. And from our own experiences, we can offer that helping hand to others, no matter what we've been through before. So I just want to introduce Josh and Kelley, both survivors of spinal cord injury, as well as Kasie, a parent and caregiver of someone with a spinal cord injury. So Kasie, we'll start with you, and then Kelley and Josh, if you could just introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Kasie Somerville. My son, Austin Somerville, was injured in 2020. It was actually May 15th, 2020. The wonderful COVID pandemic had just started, which complicated things so much, yet there was always hope. He has a C5, 6, 7 spinal cord injury and quadriplegia.
My name is Josh Basile, and my life was flipped upside down as a teenager in 2004. At the age of 18, I was in waist-high water. A wave came behind me, picked me up, threw me over my boogie board, and slammed me on my head. And that day, I shattered my neck. Was immediately paralyzed below my shoulders, floating face down in the ocean. Luckily, my friends saw me floating. They pulled me to shore. And then medevacuumed me from the main road and the beach straight to Christiana Hospital, and then made arrangements to medevac me to University of Maryland Baltimore Shock Trauma, that was where my critical unit stay was. And then I went to National Rehab Hospital for my inpatient stay.
Awesome.
Good afternoon.
Oh, go ahead, Kelley.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelley Brooks Simoneaux. I am an attorney based in Washington, D.C. But going back 22 years now, in 2001, I was a 16-year-old whose life changed in a second when I was in a car wreck. And because of a defective seatbelt, became a paraplegic. I became T12 complete injury, and bit by bit have been rolling forward every day.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. If I can just go to Josh. Josh, who advocated for you at the very beginning while you were at the Christiana Hospital, you know, when you couldn't advocate for yourself?
So at Christiana, I was there for a very short period. It really kind of not started, but I did about 4 to 5 weeks at the University of Maryland Baltimore Shock Trauma, and definitely my mom and dad were there every day. There was very limited visiting hours, so I was kind of by myself most of the day, and just kind of on a cocktail of different drugs that kind of made me feel like a zombie of sorts. And then when I then transitioned to national rehab, kind of my mom basically lived at the hospital with me. My dad came every day after work, and those were the big advocates from day one. And then also when I was an inpatient, I remember Robbie Beckman, this guy in a power wheelchair, zoomed in and almost like took out my nurse and started like antagonizing her for chocolates and treats. And it was just like, I was like, what is going on? This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it's just, he basically then looked at me and I had like a frown on my face. And he's like, son, you got to flip that frown upside down. And it was the first time I smiled. And Robbie became kind of my first mentor, kind of got me thinking of things that you could have fun, you can joke. And also during those first 100 days, I got to be able to hear the story of Tim Strachan, who was a quadriplegic, who got injured 10 years earlier than me. And at the same beach, like 3 doors down from where I was, and broke his neck and went back to school, went to community college, went to undergrad, graduated from law school, got married, fell in love, got married, had kids. And that was a huge turning point for me to be able to see that life could go on differently, but still in a meaningful way, and kind of followed in Tim's wheel tracks ever since. And all of those things have come true except getting married, but working on changing a law right now to make that possible. But yeah, so that's a little bit of my advocates during those first 100 days.
That's awesome. And that's a really important point, that part of advocacy isn't just solving problems, but it's painting a vision of what's possible and the true hopeful reality, that we can look forward to. And that is the best part about peer mentoring, I think, is just rolling into a hospital and just breaking the stereotypes and just, making people realize that it's not doom and gloom, but there is so much to look forward to. Kelley, who advocated for you when you were first in the hospital, and your family and everyone?
So I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's where my rec took place. And so after my rec, I was taken to the local trauma hospital, Erlanger Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And in those very immediate hours and days, it was addressing what kind of surgeries I needed, what all my injuries truly included. As bit by bit, we were discovering more fractures, more wounds, more things that needed to be addressed, in addition to fusing my back, where my back had been broken and my spinal cord had been injured. And my parents were absolutely, as a 16-year-old, that was my front line. They were the ones that were there all the time, that never left my side. But certainly it took a village. I had 2 sisters. There had to be people in place to care for my sisters so that my parents could care for me. And so many sacrifices to be made in those first days. Then it had to be decided, what's next for Kelley? As a 16-year-old, you're kind of on the verge of, do you get pediatric care, or can you go to an adult facility, hospital? And so that was a decision where other people were coming in, people that we knew our whole lives, but their own personal backgrounds as a physical therapist or a physiatrist, they came in and said, let's walk you through how you need to help Kelley. And we're there for my parents when they were having to make decisions, over and over and over again, so quickly. To have people with that background that could come in and be a sounding board, that could sit in on some interviews and conversations to help process information, they were critical for my parents. And that led me to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, a wonderful rehab hospital that is full of so much hope and opportunity for the people who get to go there. And my mom always says, when the first time she took a breath following my rec was the second she came into Shepherd, because she finally could breathe a sigh of relief that there were people surrounding her that knew how to take care of me. She had really been holding her breath for that whole time while I was in Chattanooga, waiting to make sure that I was in the right hands. So in those immediate days, getting your loved one, getting into a place where they know what to do and how to take care of you, is a very important step in that first process.
Yeah, being in a place where you can be confident that people know what they're doing and familiar with that condition, that is a huge difference. And Kasie, how about you from a parent perspective? What were your first steps and strategies, to handle the logistics, the emotions, everything, when Austin was initially injured?
It is a very it's very interesting for me to hear these stories from these wonderful people that, and then to shift over to the perspective of the parent, because it is very unique, of course. And so Austin was injured in a swimming pool diving accident at the age of 16, and it was a wrong perfect storm. The parents had put dish soap into the hot tub and into the pool, which formed a big layer of suds and everything all over, and he couldn't see the bottom, and he had soap in his eyes, and it was just a horrible situation. We received the phone call, my husband and I, we were only an hour away, and we received a phone call from one of his best friends, and it said, Austin's been injured, you need to come. And that was the only information that we got. That's probably the only information that was, it was best that way. And so we but you just had a sense that it was really not just a broken leg. This was going to be something serious. And so when we arrived at the pool, my husband and I, it's just like a movie. You go into that whole realm of just this trauma shock, and you can't really understand. People are crying. I'm looking at the suds. It just starts getting this very fogginess, almost like you don't know where to look or what to think. And I looked down at Austin, and he said, Mom, I can't be paralyzed. And I was just, well, why would you be paralyzed? Nobody ever said diving. Nobody ever said anything. So our first steps really was, it's interesting you use the word steps. It's just this trauma shock. It's the trauma shock at the accident. It's the trauma shock in the ER. It's not a good, I had never had the chaplain meet me at the door before. And still at that point, I had no idea that it was a diving accident. I still had no idea why he couldn't feel me touch him, why he wasn't moving. Nobody was saying anything. So you have, as a parent, I had to quickly shift from this. I had a physical, mental, everything was in shock and surreal. And I think subconsciously, I just immediately knew that my role in Austin's journey was a very big one, that I just got a very big assignment, and it was beyond motherhood. It was that I was there. I was the only one allowed into the hospital because it was COVID. Austin's father, my husband, I can't imagine how difficult that was to not come in. And so immediately I just, okay, I'm on a journey. This is like a 3-leg race. I need to make some decisions here. And so I really just subconsciously decided I needed to learn. I just needed to absorb all the information that I could about, again, nobody, not even the doctors in the ER, nobody said quadriplegia, nobody said spinal cord injury. I think that was a blessing, because I might have picked up the phone and started reading, and that was not have been a good, I don't suggest that, because you're in shock. You're in this shock, and it's too much. But just learn how to care for him. Ask the nurses, ask the doctors, ask everybody, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Why are you Why are you turning him? And just begin to absorb information, own your role that you really have been given. And
How did you,
mhm,
as you're, grappling with all this new information
yeah.
and asking all those questions and avoiding the books with information overload, how did you avoid becoming overwhelmed? What was your support structure to organize the information that you were being given and still being able to, save for later, process it at the proper time? How did you manage that? Where did you find your support as you were trying to learn all of that?
Again, it was very rare because of COVID. I couldn't even have somebody with me. So family, of course, was a big support, but I must say that our community and friends just, began flooding our family with messages, and his friends started just putting it out in social media. And so there was just this awareness that just popped up all over Greenville, South Carolina, which is where we were living at the time where the accident was. And people were coming outside of the hospital and meeting at the flagpole, his friends from school, and just, praying and just being there, even if they couldn't talk to him or see him. And so, I guess I just kind of, more than anything, you have to go inward, though. All that's going on out there, and you feel it. But I also don't have social media. I never have. So that, limits you. But I think there's also a blessing in that too, that I was able to completely focus on him and not feel like I had to, send out information or receive stuff. So I focused on encouraging him. He just, you had to almost draw inward and be like, what is truth here? How do I keep my mental and emotional balanced? And how I'm an optimistic person anyway. And so I would just grab onto any hope that I could find. And even if it was just mentally being like, okay, he's alive. He's alive. I mean, I'll go on that, just crying with him, but yet listening to him. I must say again, I think our situation's a little unique in that Austin really had a peaceful surrender to this. He was a strength for me. The very first thing that he said to me when I finally got to see him after his surgery, after everything, just like you, Kelley, they didn't know where to put him. Is he pediatric? Is he adult? And they didn't know where to put him. They put him on adult, but then didn't calculate that I could be there. And so they wouldn't even let me be there with him the first night and the first day and during his surgery. And so I was really anxious when I saw him of what's he going to say? What state is he going to be in? He's been told now, you're paralyzed for, I was assuming he had been told. He knew what he knew. And I just walked in and he just was like, Mom, come over here, please. And he just said, if this is what my life is about, it's okay. It's okay. I'll live my life for others. And he didn't even know what that meant. My point is, you find hope, you find it anywhere you can, and filter even maybe some negative things that are said. We did have some staff that had said things to me that was really hard to hear, and now I know is not true. You have to filter that and be like, do I not share that with him? No, probably not. This is not the time. And and then protect. I just kind of also went into a protect mama bear mode, I guess. People can know that he's got this no shock, didn't release that information. You definitely don't release all that his body is doing, all the areas of his body internally that are paralyzed. You protect, and protect the family. I couldn't look at any photos. I couldn't look at any videos of the past. I knew that was not going to put me mentally in a good place. I had to keep thinking, I've got to look forward. I've got to, protect myself, protect him, because I don't have the support system next to me. They're all out there. So it was very unique, yet I often say there's always hope if you really look for it. And in that situation, I discovered that was true.
Do you feel like if this had happened outside the pandemic and you weren't forced to be as isolated as you were, do you still feel like this, like your way of going about this, your way of responding to this as a parent would be, I would describe it as like an intimate response, or a what's the word I'm looking for? You responded internally as opposed to going outward and rallying the troops. It was more of, relational, you and your son, you and yourself kind of figuring this out together. Do you feel like you would have responded in a similar way, or do you feel like the situation kind of forced that approach on you?
I think there was definitely positives and negatives, especially when we got to Shepherd Center. You could really see how it benefited us. But back to the ICU, I think it would have been much healthier for our family if they would have all been able to come in, if his siblings could come and touch and hold him and hug him and talk to him instead of FaceTime real quick, I can't, switching on and off, maybe, knowing that Brian, my husband, was there with him, so I could go home and get a shower and maybe collapse, take a nap. Definitely sharing that burden more widely, more broadly amongst the family. It would have been better for the family and for me, definitely for Austin, too, to really feel that. But at the same time, we're blessed today to have the technology we do, that we did have FaceTime, we did have those things, and that made it easier. Fast forward to Shepherd, he was 12 days at the neurotrauma ICU, which is a trauma 1 in Greenville, South Carolina. We did a phenomenal job. 12 days later, he went to Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia for rehab. Kelley, I relate with your mom. It was the first time I was like able to take that deep breath and just know that he was with the experts, and that we were going to, I didn't have to be so on guard or advocating or whatever. Not that I really had to before, but definitely not here, because that's what they specialize in.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting scenario to your question, because here we are in the pandemic. Right when we got there was when one of the cars in Atlanta was set on fire, and it all just kind of, began to boom with BLM. And it was very interesting because we're in this building on lockdown. Only one person could be in with the teenagers. Not even the adult patients could have someone. Only the teenagers could have one person. And we were tested. I couldn't leave the room. I couldn't go to his therapy. I couldn't go anywhere. I was completely isolated in the room. But when he would come back from therapy, we quickly realized, you better not isolate. You better stay. You better get out of the room if you can. And so we would get our masks on and go to other rooms and just walk in. Hey, we're Kasie and Austin. How are you? And just begin to talk to them. That then formed this family. And the teens and the moms really bonded. So the benefit there was you didn't have family in and out supporting each room. We all had to support each other, and the staff knew that, and they also stepped it up as well. So there was definitely positives and negatives.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I'm just thinking back to my own experience. I was injured when I was injured in India. My first 5 weeks of rehab were at a hospital in Delhi, and my brother and my mother flew out, and they're both extroverts, like to the extreme. They'll go into a room and they'll know everyone by name, after, a few minutes. And they went into overdrive, recruited neighbors, people in different Bible studies and other organizations and things in the city who they never met before. And it, having time alone was so precious to me as a patient. It was the only time that I had to really reflect on what had happened to me. Otherwise, there were always volunteers. There was always my parents or my brother or someone there with me. And so hearing your experience during the pandemic, it made me think, what if you're not naturally an extrovert as a caregiver? What if you're an introvert? What if you prefer, quiet communication? What if you're not on social media? What if you can't recruit everyone? Just thinking, it's okay, find someone who loves doing that, put them to work, and feel good about what you can do and what you feel comfortable doing. But the most important thing, as you really testified to, is maintaining that communication, with the person you love who's injured, and making sure that they know that you're there for them, and doing everything you can to learn and advocate for them.
I mean, definitely we did that, but a lot of times, I mean, he's still very much within that 100 days, and
yeah,
and his blood pressure, when he arrived as Shepherd, he was on more blood pressure medicine than anyone they had ever, more Midodrine than anyone that they had ever not seen. That they were just like, they had called back to the hospital to see if it was really true. And so his blood pressure was really severe, fluctuations, the exhaustion, yes, the mental, emotional. You do want to just let me be in my room. And for the first 3 days, he wouldn't leave his room. So we definitely had that. But to fight for mental wellness, to fight for that your health in every way, and more importantly, to realize you're not the only one, and be like, you know what, there are introverts that are still in their room. Some of the nurses or doctors would tell us, yes, room 206, they've been there 3 weeks and they won't come out. Will you go see them?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And so then they ended up giving Austin the mayor of the floor hat, which is a big thing there, and you own a role that you see a need and you fill it, and by going outside of yourself like that, it brings healing to yourself. And so yeah, we definitely had introverted moments, but you fight through them. But you're right, you still also have those moments where we need time alone. We need time to talk about this. If he began to talk, hold off everything. I'm closing the door. The nurses, I'm listening. And sometimes he would say things I did not want to hear. That Mom, if I stay this way, this is what I can see my life being. And I wanted to jump in as a mom and be like, no, I mean this and that. But I couldn't, you can't do that, right? He's got to get it out, and to really hear those depths of the heart, I think were very important too. So that it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, creating that space for an injured family members is really hard. And would love to hear from you, Kelley, how did your community help create that space for you, and what can our communities and our families do to really support patients in those first 100 days from your experience?
Yeah, I think I'll focus kind of on a general thing. If how can a community help someone and their family, of someone who's been injured and their family, in those first 100 days, kind of thinking back, having the ability now for me to think back on my experience and the many people that I've met along my way in the last 2 decades living as a person with a spinal cord injury. And I think the first thing I would say is, you want to help create an environment for the person who's been injured, where they can focus on their recovery journey. In those first days, that needs to be their main job, their sole job, if possible. And so coming in as a community and supporting that person and their family so that the only focus is on their recovery is so huge. Like I mentioned, I'm an attorney now. And so, one easy way I can do that is always say, I'm your lawyer. Let me take care of the legal stuff. You worry about your recovery, your physical, your mental, you worry about that side. As community members, you can come in and help take away those other things going on to allow a person to really focus on their recovery journey. The next thing I would say is maybe I should have said this first, but to be there. Sometimes we don't know what to say to a family who is facing so much. And it's not because we don't want to say something, but because we don't know what to say, that we end up being silent. I can tell you that saying something during that time means so much to the person who's injured and to their families, giving those encouragement or checking in whatever way you're able to, but making sure that you're not allowing you not knowing what to say, meaning that turns into some amount of silence. The next thing is goes along with this is like, how do you help? How do your community wants to help? They want to do something in these immediate days, in these first 100 days where everything is so hard and there's so many changes, and minute by minute things could be changing. How does a community come and support you? And for a family or for an injured person, they're so overwhelmed with everything that's going on. They may not know how to ask for help. They may not know what to ask for. They may not be able to process in their minds the best things that they need in that moment. So if you're part of a community of someone who has experienced catastrophic injury, the best advice I would have is to find something you want to do and do it, and say, for example, I have 3 kids now. So if this scenario is in my life, a major hurdle for me would be like, what's happening with my kids? How can I take care of them? And so instead of me calling someone who's going through this and saying, what do you need? How can I help you? Calling and saying, I'm going to do the pickup for the next 3 days, and I'll do it next week too. Having a specific thing that you know how to help someone, so they're not even having to process how they need that help. And the second to last part would be, as a community, helping identify barriers. The person is really focused on their rehab, their bodies, recovering physically, mentally, but what barriers may exist? The things that often exist, like what equipment is this person going to need? What kinds of things are they going to need just to live in their home? What kind of wheelchair? What kind of, shower? What kind of, adaptions are going to be needed? Is their house accessible? What's their housing options now? Are they going to be able to return to the same house they were in? Financially, what are the biggest barriers to them financially? Do they, I was a 16-year-old, so that looks different than if it were now and I wasn't working. What barriers will they have to return to employment? Helping identify barriers and building that community around them that can start to troubleshoot those barriers that they know will be existing entering into this new world. The last thing I would say is the support doesn't end after the first 100 days. So know that this, for that family, for that injured person, this is the long haul. And knowing that first 100 days are so critical, but it doesn't end there.
Thank you, Kelley. I love, the point about anticipating what the needs are and doing what you can and what you want to do, and just really taking that responsibility of delegation, decision making, off the table, I think is huge. Josh, what advice would you have for someone living through those first 100 days, either the caregiver or the person themselves who's injured?
I just remember waking up in the critical unit, and it was about 14 days into my injury, because the first 14 days were just like a fog on the cocktail of drugs that they had me on. And when I did wake up and I had the ventilator in my neck, it took away my ability to speak. And that was really hard, like to have both your physical paralysis and then your voice taken away. And it's just like I lost all these powers that I had and abilities. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, they were able to wean me off the ventilator. And when I had that first word, that was first spoken word, I felt like a superpower was regained. And I made sure that every word from that moment on counted. And it's kind of the day that I became an advocate for life. So from that moment on, I made sure to like learn everything I could. And the critical unit, and especially inpatient, is a perfect place to do that. You're surrounded by medical professionals that went to school for years and years, physical therapists that are just certified in everything that they need to know for spinal cord injury. These are the smartest people within the field right then and there, and they're at your bedside. They're every day next to you doing therapies with you. So like learning everything you can and treating inpatient almost like college, where you need to get the best education possible so when you graduate, you can go on and live a productive life. So, learning everything you can, and then also also focusing on what you can't control rather than what you can't. Like if I focused on all the things I couldn't do after my injury, that would have been a very long checklist. But there was so many things that I could do. I was working on, getting off the ventilator, doing my breathing exercises where I had a straw pushing a cotton ball. I did spirometers. Next thing I know, I was able to eat again. Next thing I know, I wanted to get off the trach tube. There's all these things that I could focus on, and then getting that to physical therapy and occupational therapy. Every movement being able to try it with my brain to get the signal down. So it was so important for me to have that productive path forward. And so much of that was like hope that my family and friends injected into me. And they just basically told me that, you're the best way to recover is to meet science halfway. That means me doing everything I can physically through exercise, taking care of my body, so that when therapies or recovery, you name it, are in front of me, I have the best fighting chance to have a recovery. And that really helped give me hope. And it made me focus on those therapies. And it's just, yes, during those, I had some really dark moments. Everybody does, every single person with a spinal cord injury, while they're laying in bed by themselves or surrounded with, the photos of their past life, you name it, we have to hit a full reset button on life in many, many ways. And it's tough, but like focusing on what you can do then kind of gave me the ability just to have a priority set. And I remember prioritizing a bunch about skin management, because even during those first 14 days when I was out of it, I ended up starting to develop a bed sore. So I had to focus on healing this wound. And it's, for those people that are able to not even start going down that path, skin management in the first 100 days is like the most important thing, because it kind of takes you away from focusing on all the other things that you need to do. And it makes anything else that you need to do to be done differently, because you have to do so many pressure releases and this and that, or it will just get worse and worse and worse. And then also being able to I'm a big believer that it's so important not to be alone on this journey. Like finding my voice kind of gave me the ability to become my own best advocate and fight for my future. But to do it alone becomes a pretty lonely adventure. But if you could do it with friends, family, doctors, healthcare providers, it's like I got into sailing after my injury. I knew nothing about sailing before, but kind of being your own captain of the ship and having crewmates be along the journey with you, it makes that journey that much more safe, that much more fun. And so you don't have to You don't have to be on that voyage on your own. So it's so important to let people in, let them help you, let them make it so you don't have to do it alone. But you do have control in what path you take, what you do next. And it's just, there's the first 100 days, I just remember about 10 months after my injury, I thought back, like, why couldn't I have all this information that I had during those first 10 months, during the first weeks and months after my injury, not only for myself, but my family members. And that's when I created Determined to Heal Foundation. It was help simplify that transition. And now I've probably spoken with over 1,500 families one-on-one to help them with their journey. And I know I get to do it with you, Jonathan, which I love more than anything. Get to do it with you, Kelley. And it's just amazing to be able to bring together community so that everybody has each other's backs. And it's just, there's so much of community. Like after my injury, I kind of learned a new language. Like I speak spinal cord now, and everybody that has a spinal cord injury, like they speak a new language. The world that we speak with each other, whether it's within ourselves, our family members, our friends, like they learn all these new terms and all these new ways of thinking about life. And talking about AD, and somebody at the dinner table next to you will be like, "What the heck are they talking about?" We get it. So it's important during those first 100 days to like really learn everything you can. And I do remember when I did come home that first week, I started writing poetry, and that poetry helped get all these feelings and emotions that I had out. And going home was a rude awakening. Like being in the hospital felt very safe. There was always someone there 24/7, but then coming home, it's like, it's a heavy dose of reality, and things are just starting to get set up, and there's a new routine. There's that, there's no more consistency like you had in the hospital, but finding a way to both invest in yourself mentally and physically, you're an investment, and for the long run. The last thing I would say is that anything you hear in the hospital that gets you down, or that doctors don't know everything, doctors can't predict the future. So just, always focus on what you can do and keep moving forward.
Josh, I think something that you said is important. Like you're trying to absorb all this information in the first 100 days, but you're probably not ready to hear all of it. I know you're not.
That's why the family and friends are there.
But exactly, having people around you to listen in and to hear some of these things. I remember, there was a person who came in my room, and he was talking to me about how, I'm a paraplegic, how he was a paraplegic, how he doesn't use the shower bench and he transfers to the bottom of his bathtub, and how he had gone to Italy and just bumped down the steps. And I was like, that's great for you, but I'm not going to be in a wheelchair, so I don't want to hear that. Now looking back, I'm like, those little things he planted in my mind, I went on to be like, this is what's possible. I didn't want to hear it at the time, but it planted those seeds in my mind of all that was possible for me. And, there was a period of time in my life where I lived somewhere I didn't have a shower bench. And I kept thinking back to Robert telling me how he didn't have one. And those things that, showing what's possible, hearing other people's stories, not having to create that accessible path for yourself, knowing others have most likely gone down your path, connecting when you're ready, can really help on that journey.
There's nothing in the rules that say you have to do it all on your own and figure everything out by yourself. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a million or 3 million people with wheelchair users and paralysis in the US. Like there's so many people we can learn from. And I had a mentor that kind of showed me 10 different ways to doing one thing. And then it dawned on me, like so much of my past life, I did things 1 million ways. And now with being quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, that I do things 1 million new ways and 1 million different ways. And figuring that out, whether it's through technology, whether it's through caregivers, whether it's through friends, family, like I am very dependent on technology and others around me. But through technology, through caregivers, through friends and family, I become independent. because I become the brains of saying what direction I want to go in. So just don't ever give up hope with that, and test out the world, live with adventurous wheels, and figure out the 9 ways not to do something, so you figure out how to do it, and then you have a skill set for the rest of your life to be able to have fun with it or to be productive with it. And it's a life goes on. Like I when I was in the first 100 days, I always dreamed, am I going to be a dad? I never knew. I always had hope. I always said, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to position myself. And I was able to move forward and find that dream and have the little ones in my life that I've been working towards and I've been dreaming of ever since. And it's life goes on in beautiful ways after an injury.
I love what you guys are saying, and I think a really important point to highlight here is that you don't, your body is changing after an injury. You may look a different way, you may function a different way, but you yourself, you don't lose yourself. This is an opportunity to transform, to learn, to adapt. I love what you said, Josh, about how you speak spinal cord injury now. I did extreme unicycling before my accident, and my first goal in rehab when I rolled into the gym in Delhi, they asked, "Oh, what are your goals?" And I said wheelies, and I said unicycling. And he's like, "Okay, fine. If you can achieve that, what's your next goal?" And I said wheelies, and the OT just started to cry because he hadn't met someone who was so excited about rehab. Most of the time people were heartbroken and etc. And in my injury was actually, my recovery was pretty easy for me psychologically because I had this extreme sport background. I looked at rehabilitation as another extreme sport, another set of challenges. So, I encourage everyone, who's going through this, reach back into your own experience. What are those things that you can draw on from before your injury that, you can adapt, you can modify to move forward with it and see the injury as the, worthwhile challenge that it is. And it doesn't just have to all happen in the 100 days. There's so much more that has to happen afterwards. And if you're not in an ideal situation, it's not over. You can continue to learn. You're going to continue to learn after that 100 days. But I want to turn it over to Kasie again. For me, I felt like I managed my injury much better than my parents, and my mom specifically had a really hard time. And I really learned how to be a support to my parents, as the injured person after the fact. How did you take care of yourself and the rest of your family while Austin was hospitalized?
Well, I can give you what I did, and I can give you what I recommend. Some of those crossover. Some of those crossover. Again, it was a little unique because of COVID that I didn't have the freedom to leave the hospital and go out for a walk. I didn't have the freedom to really go home and take a shower and come back, because then I was exposed, and there was all of this very unique. So we had to get very creative, and we have dietary restrictions in our family. Austin, part of his neurotrauma was vomiting a lot at night, and food just was not settling well in his body. He was just having a really hard time. So then it's like, okay, well, how do we get that? And so it all kind of tied in together, I guess is what I'm saying is, okay, so now how do I even eat the way that I need to eat? How do I take care of myself? We had to get creative. And I think that, again, you can, if you really look hard enough, if you're like, this is what I need, and you need to find that. But I do want to say that, to preface all of that, is, as a mom, I used to think of taking care of myself in the way of that analogy that you hear about being on an airplane. Put on your oxygen mask before you put it on your child. That really doesn't apply, I think, with spinal cord injury. The way that I looked at it was more like it's a 3-legged race. And if I go down, Austin's also going to go down. then he doesn't have that advocate by his side. Nobody can really step in and do that, because if I leave, I can't come back. So I have to take care of myself, or I have to leave and I can't come back. And that's a major shift for him. And so it was like this three-legged race. So when I had to really be extra attentive to myself, so that, and I was accountable to him, because we're tied together now. Kelley, we sent out messages saying, okay, some of the cafeteria food is not going to cut it. We need Uber Eats cards, and the community flooded that in and took care of us almost the whole time we were at the inpatient at Shepherd. My oldest son took on the job. Then I think it's very important to assign roles, especially for the nuclear family. If they can have control of something, it helps, right? Everybody feels helpless when trauma happens. So if you can give them something to do, it helps. And I knew that what I was doing was actually kind of robbing traditional roles that maybe other people could have played. And so my oldest son made green drinks and would drop them off at the hospital, and they would clean the bottle and everything and then bring it up to him. And so then he got that nourishment and I got that nourishment. When we got to Shepherd Center, they did have a walking track. And if I wore my mask, I could walk on the track when he was in therapy. Well, I quickly learned that was not going to work. I couldn't breathe. And I also quickly realized that because Kelley, I was finally taking that deep breath, that I really had all these amazing advocates for him that really knew what he was doing, specifically for spinal cord nut. And I realized that I needed naps. It was okay that when he was at therapy that I took a nap, that I regrouped, because we were up so many times, maybe in the night, or it was hard, but it was just times where I remember laying on that makeshift chair bed and the nurses coming in at night to do the catheterizations. And I would just look at him and I'd be like, I'm going to stay here. Okay. And they're like, you stay there. I'm like, will you please pray over him? Yes. And I would fall asleep listening to them praying over him. And, just it was unique for me to be like, just letting others do these things. When they would ask me, and Mom, come here, you need to learn this, you need to do this. I learned that it was okay to say no, today, or I am really not ready to do that yet. I don't think that's going to be healthy for me. I'm not sure that Austin's ready for me to do that yet. He's a 16-year-old man, and I'm his mother, and I'm not ready for that. When Austin says that he wants me. So a lot of it was, even within the isolation, not isolating, letting other people know our needs. And a lot of those, just there's a lot of amazing people out there that do want to help, and they are available if they just know. Choosing hope. Josh, so many things that you said are so, I want to edify them. They're so true, just transitioning to, okay, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes today. This is a recommendation of one of my best friends who became a widow very, very young family, and she became a sudden widow. And she said, Kasie, give yourself 5 minutes to grieve, to cry, to do whatever you need to do to embrace what's really going on, the weight of it. But then the rest of the day, choose to be strong, choose how you're going to think, choose hope, choose to think of the things that he can do, not the things he can't do. Get counseling. I think that's really huge. Shepherd provided counselors for not only the patients, but also for the families. And I'm fully aware that some people don't go to rehabs, but before you leave the hospital, before you leave ICU or even your outpatient therapy, talk to your case manager and tell them, there's not a human being on this earth that can handle trauma completely on their own. It's just not the way it is. I think there has to be, I think counseling is priceless. So it's just, and then choosing truth. We had to filter. I was constantly filtering and observing and keeping track of what I'm thinking about and keeping track of what Austin's thinking about and saying, is that true? Are you going to be in your bedroom the rest of your life? Is that true? And sometimes, you've got to call on the therapist and be like, or a nurse comes in and say, hey, have you, do all patients who leave here, do they all just give up or do they all not do anything with their lives? And then they start telling stories. You start hearing stories. We were able to, along that lines, we were able to connect with Johnny Erickson Tata when Austin was in Shepherd Center. And
Wow.
and she wrote an amazing email to us, and then we end up communicating with them. And for her to give just that broad view, she didn't say anything, but just by knowing who she is, that she went on to, through her injury, create the largest ministry for disabled people in the world. And
Eric Tata is amazing.
She
And
is a
I had the
path
privilege of meeting her
carver.
too after my injury as well.
We didn't
And
get to meet her. I'm jealous. Because, and that hearing about those stories, like Josh said, adaptive sports and this and that. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was like, I really don't want to hear this because I don't want to accept this even happen. I'm not ready to hear about all the things he can do, just do different. I'm really not ready for that right now. But by being around it and meeting people who were going on to do things, and people like Josh and Kelley who go on to be lawyers and advocates and Olympians, and you end up gradually being like, okay, we are moving forward one day at a time. And I'll be honest, right now, I am speaking to you from Austin's dorm room at Clemson University.
Wow, that's awesome.
And
we have to.
He was going to be an engineer, but then he brought in his experience with spinal cord injury, and he's doing bioengineering. So life does move on.
Well, thank you so much, Kasie, and thank you so much, Kelley and Josh and Sunny for making this all work. Everyone who's watching, thank you for being here. Just remember that Help Hope Live is here to assist during those first 100 days and well beyond at www.helphopelive.org. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I really appreciate everyone's time today and your beautiful stories. We really could continue, and we will continue this conversation in a few months with Josh and Kelley as we continue talking about that going home process. So continue to keep in touch with us. Look for our updates on Help Hope Live's event page, and please reach out to helphopelive.org. Like Jonathan said, if you need help fundraising, if you need help with any of your needs as you move forward in this journey, we are here, and both Josh and Kelley and Kasie, all of them are here to speak to working with Help Hope Live and what we can do. So I appreciate all of your time and your vulnerability in sharing your stories. So thank you to everyone who joined us today, and we will be with you soon. This will be recorded, and this will be available on our YouTube page as well. So thank you again, everyone. I really do appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you, everyone.